How are you, folks? The Enzo DiCostanzo podcast. We are up to number 6. Central banks today, Federal Open Market Committee, the 10-year Treasury minus the 3-month Treasury, and an economist who worked on bank runs. We're going to discuss his work. Okay, so those are the 3 things that we're going to talk about. So let's start with central. And like I said to you guys, I will start getting the questions together. But I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about the stuff you guys asked me, what's going on in the markets right now. So that's what I'm really looking at. I'm just, taking a survey of what we're, where we are and what we're doing. So anyhow, a central bank is obviously a big part of the system that we have in this country, the capitalist system that we have in this country. It's supposed to be an institution that gives us a lot of confidence that we can keep going for as long as possible. That's about what it is. It's stocked with very smart folks. Maybe, and I'll tell you, with the leadership that the guy who was the central banker, and we're going to look at the Federal Open Market Committee also in this video. The guy who's the central banker, a little more like me in a sense, where my practical side or my clinical side is a deal maker and an analyst and a business economist, out there. What do we need to know to make this decision? And I'm faced with that question every day, even though you guys don't see me every day. The folks at the school don't see me every day, but I'm faced with that question all the time. So the leadership is now, I don't know if it was Yellen or whoever, or the Congress, whoever the response. And again, who picks it's not the tips of my fingers, but whatever political body picks the central banker for the country and really for the world, decide on a little more of a practical guy and not another Bernanke, not another Yellen, not another academic type that were just tucked away in the university somewhere, and we rolled you out because you have sterling papers and books and all these other kinds of things. But actually looking at it in terms of transactions, and maybe someone, forgive me for saying all this, maybe someone a little more street smart too. Now we had that with Volcker and Greenspan. Greenspan was smarter than everybody, and I think that may have been the problem. That he was too smart, and not just book smart, but he was practically smart too. So anyhow, central bank is a financial institution that's given privileged control over the production distribution of money and the credit for a nation or group of nations. The control over the production distribution, they don't make the Treasury makes everything. Okay, but they can direct, the central bank can direct the Treasury to do things. In modern economies, it's usually responsible for the formulation of monetary policy and the regulation of the member banks. So, and again, Yellen was at a hearing in Congress or the Senate or something, and was being grilled about, I think it was John Kennedy from Louisiana said, Mrs. Yellen, didn't you see the Silicon Valley Bank? You didn't see the train coming down the track? Very southern. And then she said that she didn't know this, and then there was a Wall Street Journal article where he's quoting. He goes, "Look," he goes, "the thing I'm talking about is right here." And she goes, "Well, that's not public information." So, again, certainly the senators and the Congress people are far more street smart than anybody on the Federal Reserve anywhere. That's for sure. But but I'll tell you, she sat there with a lot of, I don't want to say defiance, but sort of nothing's going to happen to me. So, oh well, that's sort of an attitude. And she's no one's favorite person. It's certainly in the public eye. Almost, I think Fauci, who's a graduate of many Jesuit high schools and colleges in Massachusetts and New York City, but I don't think she's really a favorite of many people out there. Just certainly in the general public, maybe in political circles, she's sort of the one. Because she does know her economics. That's sure. It's a marriage. Her husband's an economist. Yellen, I'm talking about. So anyhow, but I played that in class the other day for the undergraduates, so you guys can maybe find the hearings just type in Yellen congressional hearings, and you can probably find what I'm talking about. They're inherently non-market based or even anti-competitive institutions, so they're not there to make profits or anything like that or enrich themselves. They're there to operate the government or operate the banking, the regulatory infrastructure. They're there to operate the Federal Reserve banks, is what I was trying to spit out. They're there to operate the regional Federal Reserve banks, pay the staff, a reasonably competitive amount of money. And I think the rest of it goes into an account somewhere. And for future years, almost like a family would save and say, hey, if we need, we need some liquidity for something, we've saved it, or other regional banks use it or something, but it goes someplace where it can be used sort of as needed by the federal government, in the vein of what central banking basically is. It says central banks, okay, some are nationalized. Many central banks are not government agencies, so they're often touted as being politically independent. Wow. However, even if a central bank is not legally owned by the government, its privileges are established and protected by law of that particular government. And I think in the world that we're in today, this statement, protected by law, I think meant a lot at one time. And I don't know, today being April 1st, whatever it is, 2023, we're just a couple days after former President Trump, the 45th president of the United States of America, was indicted on a charge or a violation of a law where the statute of limitations expired to enforce that law, or to bring a case to the courts. So, this, again, I think we've got a population of people. I'm going to say this. We have a population of people, the elites, where they don't really maybe have the appreciation for the system that we have and the fragility of it, and what it's done for so many people, including the elites, what it's done for so many people. And to sit there and rattle the cage of our system is I think just a very unfounded thing, and something that I think people have not thought it through. What people are sort of instigating in this country, which I think is where we are. So, a critical feature of central banking, or distinguish it from other banks, is its legal monopoly status. So there's only one central bank per country, which gives it the privilege to issue banknotes, issues cash. Private commercial banks are only permitted to issue demand liabilities, such as checking deposits. Okay, so yeah, I mean, so for a commercial bank, its liabilities are it's deposits. Okay, and that's the big part of what my Florida folks, what we're working on, that's a big part of it that we're dealing with right now. Okay. So central bank is a financial institution. It's responsible for overseeing the monetary system and policy of a nation. So how much money we have and how much does it cost to move that money around. The wire transfer rules, which, money transmission rules, which is a big deal. It's not minor, that's for sure. It regulates the money supply and sets interest rates. Central banks enact monetary policy by easing or tightening the money supply and availability of credit. Central banks seek to keep nations' economy on an even keel. Central bank sets requirements for the banking industry, such as the amount of cash reserves that must be maintained vis-a-vis their deposits. A central bank can be a lender of last resort to troubled financial institutions and even governments. Okay, so those are some of the textbook definitions of what a central bank is. It was discovered in society that if you can start lending on future anticipated earnings, future anticipated cash flows, future anticipated activities and events, that you have you're amplifying economic activity dramatically by magnitudes by order of magnitudes, in the single digits, if not more. So if everybody just says, okay, well, I have $100, I can only spend $100, but I have $100, I want to spend $1,000. You're greasing the wheels of commercial activity. And I think as a society, we figured out that as long as people are honoring their debts, that we can operate that way. But the problem the last 20 years or so is that we've hatched a slice of the population that feels if there's enough political contributions, if there's enough sway with regulators, that we can just take large risks, not be responsible for the outcome, and live to fight another day. And then somebody else picks that up, picks up the check for us. That's, and there's a company that starts with an L, that you guys can fill in the blank, that only exists for that reason, and doesn't exist anymore, but certainly did. But its minions, its pieces are scattered out there. That's for sure. It says the responsibility is wide rangely depending on the country. The duty or the justification for their existence usually falls into three areas. Number one, they control, manipulate the national money supply. issuing the currency and setting interest rates on loans and bonds. Typically, central banks raise interest rates to slow growth and avoid. So yeah, I mean that's the big pieces of why and I had a colleague that said, well, why do we care about this so much? Which are good questions, which are very good. Why do we care so much about those 8 meetings a year and what Jay Powell says, and we have a transcript of every word that he utters and those kinds of things? Well, it's a predictor of what future actions though that entity might take, and we can transact based on our anticipation of what the central banks are going to do. Okay, so obviously looking at this, increasing interest rates was where we are right now, reducing inflation, but unfortunately reduces growth at the same time. Okay, which is a big problem, a big problem. And then lowering interest rates, encourages economic activity, encourages economic growth. Okay, industrial activity, consumer spending, creates jobs, creates earnings, creates profits, creates value in the equity markets. Okay, so that's really looking at that. And actually looking at this, I should probably do this a little bit better. Yeah, slow growth and avoid inflation. Spending in this way they manage it and achieve economic goals, full employment. Yeah, that looks better like that. But that's number one. All right, money supply and interest rates. And it says a lot of central banks today conduct monetary policy where you're trying to model out 1, 2, 3 years down the road or more that we're going to have an operating economy that operates at 2 to 3% annual inflation, and that's been determined by a lot of hopefully empirical studies that's the best number. Number two, central banks, it regulates member banks through capital requirements, the reserve requirements, which dictate how much banks can lend to the customers and how much they must keep on hand, with deposit guarantees and among other tools. And they also provide loans for banks and its governments and manage foreign exchange. Yeah, that's it manages the foreign exchange reserves of the United States of America, and how much cash you need to have on your books in case depositors are going to call in their liabilities. Okay, a central bank also acts as an emergency lender to distressed commercial banks now and other institutions. And we're going to have an article where we're going to look at one of the economists that discussed Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and what really happened with those banks. And the better way to sort of bail out these commercial banks is not for the federal government to do it or a central bank to do it, but for a central bank to encourage, and we'll put this in quotes, sort of the biggest banks on the block, the JP Morgans, the Wells Fargos, the Bank of Americas, the Citigroup. You show up with $1 billion each and backstop deposits and put some capital on the asset side of the accounting equation. That was recently done with the Silicon Valley Signature, and I think Silver Capital actually shut down. But those, and I think even First Republic received some kind of it's a bailout from the private sector that's encouraged by the federal government. By purchasing government debt obligations, for example, the central bank provides a politically attractive alternative to taxation when the government needs to increase revenue. So yeah, so really what happens is the U.S. government creates these financial instruments on a computer and says, okay, now commercial bank in Kearney, New Jersey, or Sussex County, New Jersey, you have another $10 million to lend out. Okay, kind of a thing. And you're going to owe us that. You're going to owe us that back at some point. And it's worked out in a way where it's just very appealing to do that. The Federal Reserve, along with the measures mentioned above, the central banks have actions at their other actions at their disposal. The central bank is in America. The Fed is the United States, the U.S. central bank, and the board is obviously who's down in Washington. It's the governing board that can affect national money supply by changing reserve requirements. And when the requirements minimums fall, banks can lend more money, and the economy, the money supply expands. And the idea is that that encourages economic activity. But there's a list of ways you can sort of encourage activity. In contrast, raising reserve requirements decreases the money supply. And the Federal Reserve Act, the Federal Reserve was established by the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, which I think we briefly discuss here, and the pages that are sort of coming up. We briefly discuss it. And actually, the next video will be this inflation, the connection between inflation and interest rates. That'll be next. Yeah, so raising reserve requirements decreases the money supply, and the minimum requirement falls. Uh, it increases the money supply situation. Okay, so by manipulating that, you can alter. The reserve requirements, can or that the money supply can certainly move how much activity, expanding or contracting the activity in the economy. It says when the Fed lowers the discount rate, or banks that pay on short-term loans to the central bank, okay, it also increases liquidity. So in other words, it's easier for commercial banks to borrow from the central bank itself. The federal funds rate is intercommercial bank borrowing of reserves. By lowering the rates or the interest rates, it increases the supply, which in turn boosts economic activity. By decreasing interest rates, it can fuel inflation. So the Fed must be careful. But there's not too much activity, which is what we've been living with for the last year and a half. It says the Fed can conduct open market operations to change the federal funds rate. The Fed buys or sells government securities from securities dealers, supplying them with cash, and thereby increasing the money supply. Therefore, the Fed sells securities to move cash into the pockets and out of the system. All right, so when it sells the securities, the central bank collects the cash, and it's out of circulation. It's out of being lent. Right, when the government buys securities, it supplies them with cash. Okay, so and this is something I've sort of fumbled through myself. So when is government buying and selling? Kind of a thing. So, okay, this is a little bit of history of central banks. The prototypes were the Bank of England and the Swedish bank, which is above the European continent, Riksbank, which dates back to the 17th century. The Bank of England was acknowledged the role of lender of last resort. The other early banks, notably Napoleon's Bank of France and the Germany's Reichsbank, were established to finance expensive government military operations. See, what's known as central banks historically just was a commercial bank that the government had a close relationship with and a lot of access to, is really what that was. But it's not really that anymore. It's not really the Treasury. See, in America, we've split the central bank versus the Treasury. The Treasury is supposed to manage the governmental financial affairs of the federal government, and the central bank is supposed to monitor and really be the controller of the money supply and interest rates. And it directs the Treasury to print debt and to print cash and things of that nature. And we're modeled after the European central banking system and make it easier for federal governments to grow, wage war, enrich special interests that many of the United States founding fathers opposed establish such entity but that's why. So it's the special interest getting enriched in the U.S. So the Thomas Jeffersons of the world opposed that. So the central bank, as we know it today, didn't really come into play until after the Great Depression. And more reasonable thinkers said, "Hey, we actually need something like this." But the company did have official national banks and numerous state chartered banks for the first decades of its existence, until a free banking period existed for about 30-something years. We had the National Banking Act of 1863, created the network of national banks and a single U.S. currency, with New York as a central reserve city. The United States subsequently experienced a series of panics in 1873, 1884, about every 10 years, you notice, 1907. So in response to this, the United States Congress established a Federal Reserve System and 12 regional banks throughout the country to stabilize financial activity and banking operations. So you had a federal system, not just the New York version or the Connecticut version, the New Jersey version. Right, the new Fed helped finance World War I and World War II by issuing Treasury bonds. And I think that the movie Flags of Our Father had the Iwo Jima guys from the Pacific, the guys who raised the flag, and there was all sorts of arguing about who was in the picture and whose back was to the camera, and was it the first flag, the second flag, and whatever it was. But it was the buy bonds, right? That was I think it was whoever, I don't know if it was Truman, but whoever. Roosevelt, I think, had passed away, but I think it may have been Truman. Buy bonds, and help fund the war effort. in the Pacific. Between 1870 and 1914, the world currencies were pegged to the gold standard. Maintaining price stability was a lot easier because the amount of gold available was limited. Monetary expansion could not occur simply from political decision to print more money, so inflation was easier to control. The central bank at the time was primarily responsible for maintaining the convertibility of gold into currency. It issued notes based on the country's reserves of gold. The outbreak of World War I, the gold standard was abandoned. It became apparent that at the time of crisis, the government facing budget deficits because it cost money to wage war and needing greater resources would order the printing of more money, as governments did so. And that was also flags of our father, where I think Truman said to the Navy, the guys in the Navy said, "Hey, we're printing money where it doesn't mean it's not going to have any value anymore." So as governments did so, they encountered inflation. After the war, many governments opted to go back to the gold standard to try to stabilize economies. But with this rose the awareness of the importance of the central bank's independence for any political party or administration. Oh well, we wish that the Department of Justice, we wish that the central bank, we wish that whatever, everybody was just sort of making the best decisions that they could for the populations. But I think what's unfortunately happening is here, and this is I heard this on Fox today. Someone on Fox said, in democracies, when people demand something, the government hits you over the head with what you asked for. And I think, a lot of folks are saying, well, give us a check and don't enforce the laws and this and that. Well, it's going to spiral to a point where laws aren't being enforced. And, everyone is, maybe we don't have the capitalist system as much anymore. There's a stronger version of that, even though I think they'd be very hard for me to realistically see that markets and the hospitals and the colleges are just going to go under, and all of a sudden we're going to be full on, Soviet era, communist version of a government, because I just think there's just too many special interests to let that happen. But people are demanding that, and even some of the Congress people and from the Congress women from Queens and some of those folks, that they're asking for something. And I really don't think that they really realize what they're asking for, or nor have an appreciation for the prosperity and progress and growth that the system that we've had for decades and decades, for 100+ years, and what that's really produced value-wise. That we've produced the best countries in the world, the most valuable countries in the world, the highest equity dollar value companies in the world, where 30 years ago, that was not us. Japan, the Japanese had most of the most valuable companies, and we had a few, but they were old economy companies. It was the General Electrics and the IBMs, and now we dominate that. In Saudi Arabia, us. I saw a French company on the list, but mostly American companies are what are considered the most important companies in the world. And so they said, well, we need to change that. Well, we do need to change that. So that's quite a statement to make. That's quite a statement to make. But they were very unfortunately, this right here, Great Depression, and this, we may be on the path to more of these again. And people who didn't live through World War II, people who didn't live through a Great Depression, what that looked like before you start saying, hey, by the way, we need to change the way society works. Do we have to improve components? Sure. You're not going to get an argument from me on that. But to sit there and say we need to turn everything upside down, the way the universities work and how we educate people, a person's got to want to be educated, want to learn math, want to learn physics, want to learn about, what are the characteristics of a good business versus not a good business, something that's useful for society and something that's not useful for society. What does that look like? We want to know those details. World governments predominantly favor return to central banks. Depending on the political decision-making process, the view emerged mostly from the need to establish control over war-shadowed economies. Furthermore, newly independent nations opted to keep control over all aspects of their countries. Backlash against colonialism, the rise of managed economies in the Eastern Bloc was responsible for increased government interference in the macroeconomy. Eventually, however, the independence of the central bank from the government came back into fashion, the Western economies, and has prevailed as the optimal way to achieve a liberal and a stable economic regime. Central banks and deflation, the Federal Reserve's approach, other deflation fighting measures, results of deflation fighting measures, modern central bank issues. So, all these sections we're going to just quickly pick through some of these sections. It says the central banks and deflation. Over the past quarter century, concerns about deflation have spiked after big financial crises. Japan has offered a sobering example after its equities and real estate bubble burst in the 89-90, and Buffett was just talking about this, caused the Nikkei to lose a third of its value within a year. Deflation became entrenched. The Japanese economy, which has been one of the fastest growing in the world from the 60s to the 80s, slowed dramatically. The 90s became known as Japan's lost decade, and in 2013, Japan's nominal GDP was still about 6% below the level of the mid-1990s, if you can believe that. It's still not producing what it produced a couple decades ago. The Great Recession of 08-09 sparked fears of a similar period of prolonged deflation in the United States and elsewhere because of a catastrophic collapse in the prices of a wide range of assets. The global financial system was thrown into turmoil by the insolvency of a number of major banks and financial institutions throughout the United States and Europe, exemplified by the collapse of, that company in September 08. You got to love it. You got to love it. What the results on society of this were. You got to love that. So in response, December 08, the Federal Open Market Committee, the Federal Reserve's monetary policy body, turned to two main types of unconventional monetary policy tools. Yeah, so we're going to, I was planning on maybe discussing this video, but just the length of time it's taken to get through this, I'm probably not going to head that way. But what we will do is we'll take the 10-year minus the 3-year. We'll work that example out, and we'll have this on another, that can be another video. And actually, so this, we got that, and that we're okay with that. This we're not going to get to, but it looks like we'll do the 10-year and 3-month. Yeah, we'll be able to do that. We'll cut this. And the Fortune article, and this will be for another. Yeah, we can do this here. Actually, this thing might throw that in there for now. Yeah, we're not going to get the FOMC, but we'll see. We'll see how we can, if we can get to that. So yeah, so the Federal Reserve's sort of updated monetary policy were the following: forward policy guidance, large-scale asset purchase, aka quantitative easing, which we will go into quantitative easing and not easing and all that kind of a thing, quantitative tightening, right, whatever it might be. The former involved the target federal funds rate essentially to zero, right, Paul? And talking about that too, and keeping it there at least through mid-2013, but other tools, quantitative easing, that hogged the headlines and became synonymous with the Fed's easy monetary policy. QE essentially involves central banks creating new money and using it to buy securities from the nation's bank to pump in liquidity into the economy and drive down long-term interest rates. In other words, driving down long-term interest rates, giving people the specter that you're going to just do better in fixed income longer term than owning equities or the return from equities. But shorter term, which is where we are now, we're increasing interest rates. So we've bubbled up the 3-month and the whatever, the 90-day Treasury and all the builds that are measured, in weeks and months and whatever it might be. That's where we are now. And allow the Fed to purchase riskier assets, including mortgage-backed securities and other non-government debt. This ripples to other interest rates across the economy, and the broad decline in interest rates stimulated demand for loans from consumers and businesses. And again, when everyone's borrowing, everyone is spending, everyone is saving. I don't know if we've ever had an economy like that. Okay, I don't know if we've had that. Banks are able to meet the high demand for loans because they have funds they have received from the central bank in exchange for their securities holdings. So in other words, the commercial banks have a receipt with the central bank saying, all right, well, lend out 10 million, and now there's a receipt for that with your regional central bank. The European Central Bank embarked on its own version by pledging to buy at least €1 trillion worth of bonds at a monthly pace of €60 billion. Through September 2016, the ECB launched its quantitative program 6 years after the Federal Reserve did so, in a bid to support the fragile recovery in Europe and to ward off deflation after its unprecedented move to cut the benchmark lending to below zero in late 2014 met with only limited success. While the ECB was the first major central bank to experiment with negative interest rates, a number of central banks in Europe, including those of Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, have pushed their benchmark interest rates to the zero bound. And I think what happens in Europe is we get results in America, it sort of ripples over there a year or two later. So the Greek debt crisis was, a year or so, or 2 years after the American Great Recession, 0809. The measures taken by the central bank seem to be winning the battle against deflation, but it's too early to tell if they've won the war. Meanwhile, the concerted moves to fend off deflation globally have had some strange consequences. And let's look at the strange consequences. QE could lead to convert currency to a conversion currency war. QE programs have led to major currencies plunging across the board against the dollar, with most nations having exhausted almost all their options to stimulate growth. Currency depreciation may be the only tool remaining to boost economic growth, which could lead to a convert currency war. European bond yields have turned negative. More than a quarter of debt issued by European governments are estimated 1.5 trillion currently has negative yields. This may be the result of ECB's bond buying program, but it could also be signaling a sharp economic slowdown in the future. Central bank balance sheets are bloating. Large-scale asset purchases by the Federal Reserve, Bank of Japan, and the ECB are swelling balance sheets to record levels. Shrinking the central bank balance sheets may have a negative consequence down the road. So so all the sort of these monetary policy experiments that we're just conducting in real time and in real society, and we'll see what happens, according to Obama's quote a number of years ago. So in Japan and Europe, the central bank purchases include more various non-government debt securities. The two banks actively engage in direct purchases of corporate stock in order to prop up equity markets, making Bank of Japan the large equity holder of a number of companies, including Kikuman, which is the largest soy sauce producer in the country, and directly via large positions in exchange-traded funds. That's another bubble that's sort of on the way. How much capital is in exchange-traded funds? And what is that capital chasing? What is it really chasing? Okay, you don't really know. It's like if you're going to buy shares in XYZ company or IBM or Apple, what are we investing in? We could put our finger on that. Okay, and to sit there and say, well, we're just going to invest in American industry and just sort of leave it at that. Again, we don't know the impact of doing something like that. The Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and other major central banks are under pressure to reduce the balance sheets that ballooned during the recessionary buying spree. The top 10 central banks have expanded their holdings by over almost 300% in the past decade. So that'd be 4 times. Well, 265 is 3.65 times. That's the delta. The delta 265. Let's say it's 300%. If you've changed by 300%, what that means is you're up to 4, right, from 1, because 4 minus 1 is 3. Divided by 1 that's your 300%. So you're looking at that. So you've gone from 1 to 4. So your delta is 3. So you're at 4 times, or 3 times the change. Unwinding or tapering the positions is likely to spook markets, since a flood of supply is likely to keep demand at bay. Moreover, the more illiquid markets, such as mortgage-backed securities, central banks become the single largest buyer. In the U.S., for example, the Fed no longer purchasing and under pressure to sell. It is unclear if there are enough buyers at fair prices to take these assets off the Fed's hands. The fear is that prices will then collapse in these markets, creating more widespread panic. If mortgage bonds fall in value, the other implication is that the interest rates associated with these assets will rise, putting the upward pressure on mortgage rates in the market and putting a damper on the long and slow housing recovery. One strategy that can calm fears, but the central banks let certain bonds mature and refrain from buying new ones rather than outright selling. But even with phasing out purchases, the resilience of the market is unclear, and since central banks have been such a large and consistent buyer for nearly a decade. Okay, that was a mouthful. So we have the relationship. So this will be another video, that particular relationship between inflation and interest rates. We'll get to the FOMC. We'll get to that. I want to work on this, and we'll see. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about this here. Maybe we can talk about a little bit about it in another. Maybe we can split this up into two. Into 2 videos, perhaps. We'll see if that works for us or not. So these we talked about. This will be next. Okay. Save there. Okay, a little bit on this article, and then we'll get to the math. Yeah, this one's a bit long, so we'll do half and half with this article. So Okay, I may have spoken about this in a previous lecture a bit, but the economist who won the Nobel Prize in economics for his work on bank runs breaks down the Silicon Valley Bank's collapse and the fears over what's next. So this is just 2 weeks old. A small one of the most Americans were stunned and confused by the full Silicon Valley Bank. How did a cornerstone of the dynamic venture capital community, the nation's 16th largest lending institution until recently, enjoyed growth worthy of tech startups it served, fall so hard so fast? Is the failure is its failure the legacy of poor practice specific to the company, or is the Fed's monetary policy of dramatically hiking interest rates that hammers the value of bond investments endanger fellow mid-sized lenders? I mean, that's a key question right there. What is sort of what are we looking at? I mean, what caused this, and then what are we looking at for the future in situations like this? Those we'll repeat these questions. Is it the failure of poor practices of the management? Is it the bank's fault, or is it the central bank? Is it the commercial bank's fault or the central bank's fault that this happened? So, did bad management destroy Silicon Valley Bank? And why didn't the regulators step in and say, "Look, we see problems here"? Yeah, the federal regulators, the state regulators, right? They didn't see the run, and that was John, the senator from Louisiana, the gentleman from Louisiana. That was his question to Janet Yellen. Did you not see the runaway train coming? I was driving. I was in between classes. I go home to check on mom, and as I was driving, I think I saw a white Tesla in my line of sight, and I saw the left rear wheel was wobbling. So when I caught up to the car at the light, I beat my horn. I told the folks, I said, "Your wheel is," and they were it was a husband and wife. They looked like they were Indian. They were very grateful. I said, "You're welcome." I said, "No problem." So it's a bad management. Yeah, okay. And then it's now that we have an economist who I think he's at the University of Chicago, studies bank runs and why banks collapse and that kind of a thing. And what's next? So yeah, University of Chicago. So easy to grasp answers. Yeah, this guy won the Nobel Prize in 2022. Fine. And his research partner at Washington University in St. Louis, and the former Ben Bernanke, post Federal Reserve chairperson, still at it, still working, and winning a Nobel Prize on top of it. It says the Dybig research that captured the Nobel stressed the banks are inherently fragile and vulnerable to runs because if customers exit en masse. So again, the intellectuals love to say things are very obvious and say, "Oh, by the way, give me an award for saying the obvious here." The lenders may need to sell their bonds or loans that would have been fully paid off on maturity at poor prices. That's a big part of it. That banks had to liquidate these debt instruments at prices that caused a realized loss on these financial instruments. A panic can unnecessarily ruin an otherwise healthy bank, and Diamond and Digbig emphasize that both sound regulation and prudent management of broadly diversified banks broadly diversifies the risk in both the loan and investment portfolios, and the makeup of customers are essential to instilling client confidence, and required to keep American banks out of harm's way. So again, let's think about this. Well, on the asset side of the accounting equation, you have investment portfolios are assets, makeup of customers or liabilities, and then a loan portfolio is also an asset. It's supposed to be a cash flow generating asset, and if it doesn't generate those cash flows, it's a bad asset. Okay, and you made bad loans, and then if your depositors say, "Oh, by the way, we're out of here," and you didn't get the principal back, it's a defaulted debt instrument. Is really what it is. Then what? Then what? Right. In October, just after receiving the prize, I'm warned that in a fortunate interview, the Fed policies of raising tax rates at a brutal, virtually unprecedented pace would trigger dangerously big losses in the bond portfolio of the companies and banks that believed inflation-adjusting yields sitting at near zero for years would stay there for years to come. Well, the problem was the market to sell these debt instruments had changed. Because all of a sudden now you have a prettier girl at the dance. If there's a prettier girl at the dance, the initial girlfriend may not be so appealing any longer. That's basically what happened here. It says, but in our hour-long interview, the Silicon Valley Bank debacle, Diamond stated that though the Fed policy hurt, it wasn't the main reason for the implosion, nor did the Silicon Valley Banks suffer the classic sound bank wrecked by a stampede scenario. Instead, Silicon Valley Bank pledges about every bad policy on both the asset and liability sides of the accounting equation of the balance sheet. So for Diamond, Silicon Valley Bank case is a study in how setting a bank's rickety structure to enable breakneck expansion created daunting risks that prudently run banks, despite the Fed's huge run-up in rates, would have avoided. Okay. What makes bank work? What makes banks work, and how did Silicon Valley Bank broke the mold here? Yeah, I mean, banks secure the customer's trust, protect themselves from a wave of withdrawals. Um, these guys, outside of Ben Bernanke, who most likely never operated a bank or ran a bank, or most likely are just pure academics. If I'm wrong about that, I apologize. But it's these guys are explaining how the bank should be structured. It says on the asset side, the banks make loans to a lot of different people, a lot of different types of people and businesses. Banks create safe assets out of risky ones by diversifying. I think people running banks know that. So, but okay. And then they have diversified funding sources. I think people run banks also know that. Since depositors don't all need their money on the same date, the diversification allows the bank to economize on what they hold in cash and liquid assets. As for liabilities, it's a key that banks has a wide varied range of depositors and have loads of retail customers. Is a boom, which is fine, but when rates on treasuries jump, they're less likely to empty their savings or money market accounts to get some extra yield than our corporate clients. Well, a retail customer versus a more sophisticated customer versus a less sophisticated customer. That's about what this guy is saying here. So corporate clients will yield shop, and retail customers don't have the time to yield shop. That's sort of what's going on there. It's crucial to understand the role of two classes of investments. Now we're going to get into accounting here. What's available for sale, what's held to maturity. Available for sale means you can sell these instruments at any time, and it's a mark to market. And there's a valuation that happens at the end of every quarter that's mark to market, which, by the way, is how Enron got into trouble. So 20 years later, we're going to do this again now. If a bank's holding treasuries about earlier last year at extremely low yields and rates jump, the price of the bonds might fall sharply, hitting the bank's capital. The second investment category is held to maturity, which comprises fixed income securities that banks intend to keep on the balance sheet until it's redeemed, okay, at the full par value. Once each quarter, the banks can shift securities between these two accounts, and if at their full par value, once each quarter, the bank can shift, and if they need to replenish their equity, they'll transfer bonds from the long-term hold to the trading account. But if banks would transfer hold to maturity securities that have unrealized losses, that would raise liquidity, but hit their book equity even harder. And this is a quandary that Silicon Valley faced before. So yeah, that's a little bit of an accounting not double sweep. That's a little bit of an accounting detail there as to which of these securities are you counting as your capital, as your regulatory capital. Okay, and if you're holding a security as regulatory capital and the value of that security declines, are you replacing what the missing part? Are you replacing that delta with cash, with your cash, with somebody else's cash? Okay, that's really what's wrong here. Okay, Silicon Valley Bank. Now they're getting into the details here. It says count $26 billion in available for sale instruments. Treasuries, agency mortgage-backed securities issued mainly by these government agencies, Fannie and Freddie Mac. As Diamond points out, after those available for sale bonds were all highly liquid, they'd easily sell for full market price and stood no danger in suffering haircuts if dumped fast. Haircut is a difference in what you thought it was worth versus what it's really going to be worth. The balance sheet also contained $91 billion of held to maturity bonds, which over 90% sat in agency issued mortgage securities that also benefited from a deep active market. The $74 billion credit portfolio was highly concentrated, consisting of loans to startups. So they're breaking apart the balance sheet. $26 billion here, $74 billion there, $91 billion of something else. Okay, that's really what this stuff is. This is agency there. Okay. Highly concentrated. So yeah, you have a 74 billion piece, not a 26 billion piece. Let's see. These are okay. This is assets. This is assets. And these are the loans. Yeah, these are the so that's all that's all supposed to be on the asset side. Yeah, that's all on the asset side of the accounting equation. So those companies also so the people running these startups also kept deposits with this bank. So they got a loan from the bank, but also kept the deposits there. It's been reported that Silicon Valley Bank often placed covenants in its loan agreement requiring a borrower keep deposits at the bank there. That's possible. And here it is, right? Silicon Valley Bank mismatched its investments to deposits, funding them. So available for sale, right? The ones Silicon Valley Bank would have to sell in emergency were generating a small yield, and it purchased a lot of the securities before rates spiked in the spring of 2022, and the average maturity on the available for sale was about 3.5 years. At the end of 2022, nearly 90% of the held to maturity loans carried maturities over 10 years. So yeah, now he's talking about the duration of some of these now. So held to maturity were over 10 years, and the return was just lower than market value out there, lower than market rates out there. Before rates explode, and the loan portfolio was generating low returns under 4% after the provisions for credit losses. So again, you made the deals for these loans in a lower interest rate environment. Okay, so there's more to talk about this, but I'll split this into the next version of that because it is a little bit long. So yeah, we kept it. Yeah, we kept that all together. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now let's do our delta. We worked on this last time. Let's get our delta for our 3-month. Yeah, our 3-month versus 10-year, and the other one was a 2-year versus a 10-year. That delta, right? And I think we did a couple things here. What did we do with this? This is 2-year, 3-month. And here's your delta. And I think we looked at some of our volatility in this, certainly in March. And I think we noted some, bad volatility there. 13%, minus 46%, 38%, highly, but still it averaged out to about 2.5. Funny enough, because you had some positives too. But those are some swings. Okay, those are some swings. All right, let's get let's do this. Let's get the 3-month graph. Let's do that. And again, folks, just be a little patient with me while we sort of deal with this. 3-month Treasury St. Louis Fed. Okay, so we have the yield 3-month Treasury. We're going to go to 2018, the first day of trading there. So you can see, obviously, this is spiked dramatically. We'll download. There we go. Okay, we'll edit. Now, for better or worse, we're gonna have to go through this. And again, like in class, especially the undergraduates, you guys are well aware of just sort of the tedium in doing this. So just bear with us while we do all these nice and easy, nice and slow. Now you got a bunch there. This thing in January, whatever that is. See, this computer, it's nice. This is my home, my desktop at home. It seems easy. In class, it seems a little more difficult to pull this off in class. I don't know why, but almost there, folks. Well, I guess I've said to you guys a number of times, you know, this disciplines the mind, and it's a very good exercise to go through this stuff. Again, I probably say it all the time, so forgive me, but why the federal government can't post this without us having to worry about doing all this, I'll never know. But almost there, almost there. But again, folks, this is computer science, right? It's doing things like this. You got to clean something up. You got to look through it yourself, right? That kind of a thing. All right. So we'll copy and we'll drop these in, just the values, okay? Because it's already formatted for us. That's the first or whatever. And actually, also, we can go through all of this. No border. We're gonna paste formatting into that, and we're gonna drag the count, the countdown. Okay. So yeah, this is 3-1. Yeah, we're off a bit. Again, we're off slightly, so we got to find where whatever's wrong, we got to find it, and wherever that is. Yeah, 28, we're good. 1, 29, 5-1, 531. $18 seems pretty good. 30, 31. Yeah. Okay, so 18, we're good. Okay, now we're in 2020. And we're pretty good. It's 4-6, 11. I'm reading across the dates, right? In our previous work, we're horizontally matching everything up. 9-3, 10-7. Six, 9, 21. Oh, here we go. Somewhere in here. 13, 7, 8, 6. Two, 30. There we go. We have an extra 12 in here somehow. As long as our 10-year doesn't have that, that's a 2-year. We should really be comparing it to the 10-year. Yeah, because we have to ID all this stuff. There's those dates. Okay, so we're 9:30 here. At 9:30, okay. We're 6-1. Off by something here, so. They were off a little bit by something. That's not it. $30, we're good. And there's 10-1 there, so. 816. This is 10-1. 1, 4. Right there. There's a 12, 13. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, I mean, look, for whatever, I accidentally notched out of that one, but what are you going to do? So we're just going to, kind of how we'll do it. So I apologize for this, not the best sort of decision making with that, but what are you going to do? 31. This is 30. Well, we're off. You want to be on target across the board here. So I think somewhere along the way, I think I remember doing that, missing something. But that's fine. One. Yeah, I think that was it. 4. 24. Yeah, let's just stop at 24. I know there's other stuff here, but let's just do that. Okay. And again, the last couple days, I'm sure we would have good cause and good reason to want to analyze that. But this is just for what we're dealing with here. So there's no fill. There we go. Okay. So, like I said, you have the 3-month. You have your 3-month there, and again, as I've said, previously, and actually here, yeah, that's the. Oh, oops. This was, what did we do here? Yeah, this was the 3-month. I can leave these here, but it's good we got our hands around this. This is the delta, but that's fine. 2-year. I know we did the 3-month. Okay, whoops. I didn't realize we had the 3-month sitting here. Okay. Yeah, this is off a bit too. Yep, off a bit. Hopefully we fixed it now. Yeah, 12-1. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, the whole 3-month was off a bit. And you guys remember what we did here, right? You went through. You're good with that. It's just this thing's just these are just we just cut these up a bit. Order. Like I said, you got to go through and you guys remember, like I said, but if and when you're doing this, for real, you're gonna want to go through with a fine tooth comb, kind of a situation, right? You're gonna want to be able to do that. I'm sure there's a lot of fixing, but we're not going to worry about that right now, right? We do care about is, but yeah, we lined up everything, which is fine, and 10-year, 2-year, yeah. Now here, this is we set this up, but actually what we needed to do was I downloaded the 3-month. Well, let's do this. 10-year minus 3-month. We're going to check this volatility. And we're going to go from 18.1. There we go. Okay. As you can see, though, you crossed over again about the summer, just like I said in the live class. The yield curve inverted, and we're showing you how that happened. And surprise, surprise, you had a yield curve inversion here, and then you started the that's the pandemic recession. And if you look at these recessions going back, whatever, to the 40s or something like that, 1945 or whatever it was, you'll really see that. Yeah. Now, again, folks, I apologize for having to go through this again, but we're going to have to go through this because we're getting the actual data here. So we're just going to do this one more time. Again, you got to go through, again, get rid of all these sort of, again, when the data is free, I suppose this is the price you pay for free data, I guess, right? This is the price you pay for for free data, I suppose. So almost, that's it. Yeah, there we go. Actually, whoops. Whoops. Hold on 1 second. Da, 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 da. Yeah, no, this is the data. So copy, paste values. Now you have a couple extra down here. Yeah, there's 28. All right, whatever. 5, 2, 18, 5. Yeah, we're good so far. 10.4. Here it is, right in there somewhere. 30 we have. So here we're okay. 8. There's that extra. And like I said, I think I blew it someplace. So you're going to cut. Well, you're going to cut over this. There it is. All right, 13. All right. There it is. Up to 24. Get rid of all that stuff. Okay. So, and then we'll do. So that's the downloaded version of this. Right, that's this. Right, where you're going to go negative in there. Right, you're going to go negative in there is what you're doing. And we don't need. We don't need marker options, so it flows negative from last summer. All right, and again we're going to cut and paste the graph this time through. But now here's the big move with this. I'm going to go right, and we'll say equals the 10-year return, the 10-year market yield, and we'll subtract it from the 3-month there. And you want to get the same, same, and it looks like that's what we're doing. So pretty good so far. We're matching it, right? See the delta percent, the basis point difference. We got this. Good. So we got it right. Yeah, 1 through 6. The last one was 1 through 6. 108. Okay. So we matched it up nice is what we did here. So save your work as you go. We could always graph volatility as easy as the yields. The graph that we're going to put together from this, and again, this is just the same graph, the same maneuvering that we've done previously. We're going to use this, and it'll be 10-year minus 3-month. So instead of reformatting everything, we'll just drop this off here. We'll click. You are in CO. And this is CP. And this is minus 3 month. Okay. And there it is. That's your percentage difference. Okay. Yeah, you went up to the 24th. Okay. And now we can go through and we'll do that. So again, how to generate, more graphs without just sort of repeating everything, every single time, right? Which you sort of want to avoid that as best you can. We'll just drop this off in here. There you go. And like I said, you can generate your reports and put these on there and discuss what's going on. Okay, but you can see you're crossing over around the summertime, around July. That's your yield curve flipped. Yeah, we're good. We are good. So no longer, again, when your data grows like mine grows, we're really doing this all the time. It's a little tough to sort of keep everything. So, and now what we'll do our basis change with this. We could take the downloaded numbers, right? We could do those percent change, about a 1% change in the day. Yeah, you could increase this a bit if you wish. And you can see though, the last whatever, right, the last month or so, it's really, this one's off a bit, whatever this one is. Yeah, that's a 10 minus the 2. Like I said, I lost a piece of data somewhere, so I apologize for that happening. But 1, 3, 1. Oh no, we are. We've got that. Yeah. So what is this? What did I do here? Oops. Yeah, we have it. We have it right there. Yeah. No, we're on target with everybody. 28, 28. Yeah, 28, 28. Yeah, we got it all. And like I said, these need to be fixed. And then these, yeah, this needs a couple more decimal places. All right. There's a lot of fixing you gotta, like I said, we're not gonna do every single one of these, but yeah, that's kind of what you have to do. Right? It's gotta look good. Your work has gotta look good. Okay, for someone to read it, for someone to take it seriously. Excuse me, folks, 1 second. Okay. Like I said, you go through, you fix all this stuff, and it's a good mental exercise to, it disciplines the mind well, which I think is an important piece of the puzzle. All right, you got all that. And like I said, you can get to the rest of this, at your convenience. You can go up top here, probably fix some of these other ones that need to be fixed. Yeah, with the basis points, you want to give it a couple more. You want to give it a couple more. What do you call it? You want to give it a couple more places of importance. Decimal places, kind of a thing. Yeah, and again, same thing here. This is the 3 month that needs to get, you to line that up a bit. So it's a good lesson in not to mess this up, because if you mess it up, you have a hell of a lot of work to do to go back and sort of fix everything here. And you can see the amount of work that it is to go back and fix it all by hand, which is a lot. All right, you got to put new borders in, right? All this, and just go on and on and on, all this stuff. See, this is really up here. And you got to fix what you're talking about here. All right, this is up one like that. Up one. Okay, it's got to be the month that you're talking. So, folks, let me tell you these details, and like I said, and that I missed a data point somewhere, and it kind of messed up the whole thing. You can see this stuff it takes on a mind of its own. These things, So you want to make sure that you don't make a mistake that it's going to follow you your whole model, and you're going to keep adjusting for that little mistake that you made someplace. So you got to just keep that in mind. So 5.5. Okay. So yeah, let's look at the some of the average percentage changes here. So we'll take this, copy that right there, equals average. So for March, our basis point change is about -2. Check that, and that's about on average about a 2.5% change on the day for the delta from the 10-year to the 3 month. And the basis change is about a 2, which is really small. So and this one up one like that. Yeah, but again, -1 on that, and this is about whatever it is, 2%. And again, the people in these markets are very hooked into what's going on and what moves them. So they were looking at when you're having a January move like this, people were anticipating problems or heard about it from somebody they went to school with or whatever it might be. But there were problems being anticipated here. No doubts about it. In January, you had a 4% change in January on this quantity or on this measure. This was up one more. And folks, like I said, so you go through all this stuff, and you get the monthly average percentage change on the yield or the difference, and you can analyze that. Okay. So, like I said, I'm not going to do all 5 years worth, but if you're doing this, you should go through and do all that. Okay, so you can have some idea. But certainly, looking at this, March had a lot of volatility in this, and just look at these percentage changes: 13%, -11%. Big swings that we don't generally see in this. Well, maybe here we did a bit, but yeah. But see, again, in the summer, let me tell you why. Post July 2022, you saw the swings, but previous to that, you can see you don't have 10, 11%. You don't have those. So people were sensing what was going on in this market in the summer. And I'd heard little bits and pieces on the news, but it wasn't certainly it wasn't as out there as it is now. But certainly, these deltas and these differences, you got to go through and as you get more experience with the data, get more experience with the markets, you're going to know what to look for. Okay, that's really the lesson with all this. Always save. And again, I'm not going to go bananas, lining up 5 years of 1,300 pieces of data. But if you do the work, it should all line up. Okay, like I said, so you have a graph. So this was the 10-year minus the 3-month treasury, what that looked like, and really, okay, all this. You're going to have to never give at the people you work with, your Excel. You're going to have a graph and maybe a little bit of a couple lines of analysis, maybe a definition or two, something like that. Okay, but you're not going to go through say, hey, here's 1,300 pieces of data. You look through that. You should never do that. Okay, you need, your job as the analyst, is even as a statistical analyst, is to just concisely communicate what you're trying to say, in a screenshot, in a screenshot. And I communicate in a lot of screenshots with the people I work with. Okay. All right, folks. We did some good work today. So we took care of this. This we don't need. This we don't need. All right. The Enzo Di Cosenzo podcast. We're signing off for today. Thank you very much.